Normal and quiet English village between 2014 and 2017 lived a kind young man named Benjamin Field. But what no one knew was that he was manipulating people from the very beginning, right to the point where he eventually destroyed the lives of two neighbors, all while pretending to care for them. His story is one of deceit, betrayal, and cold-blooded manipulation. Benjamin Luke Field was born on October 27, 1990, in Market Harborough in Leicestershire, East Midlands. His father was an Enfield Baptist minister, and his mother was a former Liberal Democrat politician who had also worked for Age Concern. Benjamin had a brother named Tom and a sister named Hannah. The Fields were known for their big Easter egg hunts and Bible readings in their garden. Despite their warm gatherings, some neighbors thought the family came off as a bit cold, as if they believed they were better than everyone else. Benjamin's dad often compared himself to Jesus, which the neighbors found quite strange. With such high expectations placed on them, Benjamin and his siblings were raised to be not just model citizens, but leaders in whatever they chose to do. According to Ben himself, none of his relationships, not even with his own family, were based on any form of love. He grew up in a cold, emotionless, and clinical environment, which led him to think he was above everyone. He was arrogant, completely emotionless, and had no sense of empathy. These traits carried over to his time at Bishop Stopford School, where he eventually came to be known as a distant and unlikable young man. One former classmate described him as in love with his own intellect, while another said he was always a loner and had no close group of friends. There were times when Ben would try to socialize with classmates, but it was usually only when he wanted something. On one occasion, Ben ran for class president and started talking to other students as if he was their friend and genuinely cared about them. But once he lost the election, he never spoke to most of them again, showing that for him, relationships were just about what he could get out of them. He spent most of his time in the library reading books and learning complicated new words just to show off his intellect. He'd then slip these words into conversations to seem superior. Ben also loved arguing with teachers and often corrected them in a condescending way, for which he was constantly scolded, given how arrogant he was. Although he was actually smart, his ego held him back. His brother had already taken his Math A levels early and was heading to Cambridge University to study music, while Ben struggled through his A levels, ending up with just average grades. In the end, he went to Buckingham University to study English literature, but this was a far cry from the heights his brother had reached. Ben carried his unpleasant and arrogant personality with him to university, where he quickly became unpopular with both students and lecturers. An article about him said, "For him to succeed, someone else had to fail." But it was an act. The police would later uncover messages where Ben admitted to feeling unworthy and inadequate. His arrogance and constant need to show off were just ways to boost his self-esteem and convince himself of his own lies. Since he wasn't doing so well academically, Ben looked for other ways to feel powerful and reinforce his sense of superiority. This led him to pick up two main habits that would shape the majority of his personality: compulsive lies and making up stories about his alleged successes, such as claiming he was a playwright. In time, Ben became an exceptionally skilled liar and used this ability to manipulate and exploit people. The power that lies gave him and his ability to deceive others clearly inflated his ego. Alongside this, Ben developed a disturbing interest in elderly people and began spending a lot of time reading about euthanasia, suicide, and loneliness in older people. Around 2012, when he was about 22 years old, Ben began working at Red House Nursing Home in the village of Maid Morton, Buckinghamshire. Rather than caring for the residents, he began to abuse them and even recorded it. But unbeknownst to him, these videos would eventually lead to his downfall. Instead of seeing his actions as the pathetic behavior of a man who could only feel powerful by exploiting the most vulnerable, Ben continued to believe in his own delusions of superiority. But before he started working there, he met a very specific person who would change his life: Peter Farquhar. Benjamin Field met 61-year-old novelist and guest lecturer Peter Farquhar on April 2011. The two met at the University of Buckingham, and their relationship soon became official with what they called a betrothal ceremony. In one diary entry, Peter described the event as one of the happiest moments of my life. Gone are the fears of dying alone. Peter Anthony Scott Farquhar was born on January 3, 1946, in Edinburgh, Scotland. Although he spent most of his life in England, little is known about his early years. What is clear is that he was academically gifted. He attended LMA Upper School in Hammersmith, London, before earning a place at Churchill College, Cambridge, where he graduated with a first-class degree in English. Peter was a devout evangelical Christian, but he was also gay. As he wasn't able to reconcile his faith with his sexuality, he chose to live a celibate life. Instead, he focused on his passions, the English language, and teaching. Over his 34-year career, he held various teaching positions, including 12 years at Manchester Grammar School during the 1970s and early 1980s, and 21 years at Stowe School from 1983 to 2004. For some, Peter Farquhar became almost like a second father. His first book was released in 2010 and focused on a school chaplain trying to reconcile his Christian faith with his homosexuality. He was well loved in his community and valued by his friends and family. But Peter was also lonely. As he grew older, he became more and more isolated, especially after the death of his mother in 2002, with whom he had lived. The fear of dying alone grew stronger as he lacked intimate relationships and affection from others. Unfortunately, Peter couldn't have known that someone would exploit his vulnerability and fear of loneliness. Benjamin Field, who sensed Peter's emotional fragility, would eventually use this against him to manipulate and destroy him. After the two met, Peter wrote in his journal, "I took my first lesson with a class at Buckingham University, a pleasant enough group, if not very responsive yet, except for one clever, enthusiastic lad, Ben Field. He engages and helps make things work. He's a delightful young man." It's clear that Field quickly saw Peter Farquhar as a prime target, someone lonely and easily manipulable. Soon after meeting Peter, Field wrote in his journal that Peter was an ideal target because he was lonely, retired early, rattled around the house, not really doing anything, filling his days. Field also wrote, "It is my own ambition seeking to exploit Peter's desire for companionship." So, Field began grooming Peter as he pretended to share the same Christian beliefs. In reality, Field had no genuine religious conviction. Instead, he was motivated by a desire for power and control. To get closer to Peter, Field joined Stowe Parish Church, where Peter had been a regular visitor for 20 years. There, he became closer to Peter and even befriended other church members to reach more elderly people. Over time, Field became a churchwarden, volunteered, and even worked to become an ordained vicar. Throughout 2012 and 2013, Field pretended to struggle with his sexual identity and even hinted at romantic feelings for Peter. But in reality, Field was entirely heterosexual and involved in multiple relationships with women at the same time. He was manipulating everyone around him and would even use excuses to explain his absences related to Peter. Field would often tell Peter that he was away for job training, when in fact, he was living with one of his girlfriends. In early 2013, Field made his plan. He told Peter he needed a quiet place to study. So Peter invited him to stay at his home at 3 Manor Park in Maid Morton. Field took advantage of this invitation and began visiting him every day. He spent most of his time talking with Peter. He listened attentively to everything Peter said, then went away to research it to make sure he could continually impress and charm the lonely man. Field threw himself at the center of Peter's world and frequently told Peter how much he loved and cared for him. In his journal, Peter wrote, Please God reward Ben for his goodness to me and others. He's taking his job at the care home very seriously as he helps old people with their dementia. He's too close to death and more interested in it than he should be. There's a tragic irony in Peter asking God to reward the very man who would eventually kill him. Soon, Field was given a key to Peter's home, which allowed him to come and go as he pleased. With his access secured, Field began manipulating Peter to change his will and leave his house to him. He now had a new plan. A second post-mortem revealed he had consumed less alcohol than initially thought and had sedatives in his system. Dr. Brett Locke, a consultant forensic pathologist, testified that Peter died from a mix of alcohol and lorazepam, which could have impaired his breathing. He couldn't rule out the possibility that Mr. Farquhar had also been smothered. Toxicology results showed repeated exposure to lorazepam and other sedatives in the months before his death. When police searched Ben Field's home, they found all kinds of things. Diaries listing names under the title 100 Clients, which Field described as potential targets for fraud or other schemes. This list included his own family members and Miss Moore Martin. The authorities also discovered books on poisoning and suicide planning. An investigator noted that Field seemed to take great pleasure in inflicting pain for financial gain and control. Although Field denied plotting to kill his neighbors, he admitted to lying to them and Ann Moore Martin. He also confessed to getting money under fake names. Ben Field's trial also saw his friend, magician Martin Smith, face charges of murder conspiracy, fraud, and burglary. Field was arrested in January 2018.
Ben Field arrested on suspicion of murder, Peter Farquhar. Do you not say anything that may harm the defense if you do not make sure when question something which relates to
After his arrest, psychiatrists diagnosed him with either narcissistic personality disorder or psychopathic personality disorder. On August 9, 2019, he was found guilty of the 2015 murder of author Peter Farquhar, though he was acquitted of attempting to murder Ann Moore Martin, who had died of natural causes on May 12, 2017. During the same trial, Field admitted to charges of fraud and burglary involving both victims. In October 2019, he was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 36 years.
I mean that he's been found guilty of appalling crime. I know he's my brother, but I mean, we were listening to the police and the QCs in court. You hadn't heard stuff like that before. And so, society needs to be protected. And I would hope that they wouldn't let him out until they were utterly convinced, with people committing themselves to the fact that, they were certain. And I see that being a lot.
Martin Smith's involvement remains murky, as he was eventually acquitted of all charges related to this case. There were suspicions that he might have been part of Field's schemes, but the court found insufficient evidence to link him directly to the crimes. Tom Field, Benjamin's younger brother, was also acquitted of a fraud charge. But if it hadn't been for the renewed investigation after Peter Farquhar's exhumation, Field might have been walking free today. What do you think motivated Benjamin Field to target Peter Farquhar and Ann Moore Martin? Was it purely financial gain, or do you believe there were other psychological factors at play? Comment down below. If you want more videos like this, please consider dropping a like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on more true crime videos. Take care and see you in the next one.